Why is he so defensive? Hey there, I'm Sharon Pope. I'm the love and relationship coach for women who are struggling in disconnected marriages and trying to figure out, can they stay and make it work, or is the only answer to leave? If you like what you hear, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. So why is your husband so defensive all the time? That's what we're going to talk about today. Here's the thing. If there is one area that every single person on the planet could get better at, it's communication inside of our marriages. And oftentimes, I think we go into having the really difficult conversations with our spouses, and we unintentionally set ourselves up for failure because no one ever taught us how to do this well. Oftentimes, what we'll do is we will go in very clear about what it is that we want to say to our partners and what we want them to hear, as opposed to really setting the stage for having a real conversation, an exchange back and forth about a struggle inside the relationship. And because nobody on the planet likes to be talked at, what ends up happening is that the person who's on the receiving end of that talk gets pretty defensive. And when they get defensive, they can't hear you. And so we have the same problems and the same talks and the same arguments over and over again, and nothing ever seems to change. You see, it's human nature that if we feel attacked in any way, and that can include being criticized, being disrespected, if we are feeling like we're being attacked, then we automatically have to defend ourselves, don't we? And when we're busy defending ourselves, we're not really listening. Think about it like this. Have you ever been on the receiving end of someone yelling at you, maybe even having their finger pointing in your face? Were you listening to them more once they started yelling at you, or were you listening to them less? That's what's happening. Even if there's no yelling going on, the dynamic is the same inside of communication. If someone feels like they're being criticized, then they're going to feel like they have to defend themselves. And so oftentimes we will come into conversations and we will start with what I call the 4 dreaded words. We need to talk. And we will have a whole litany of things that we want to say to you. But we don't ever start from setting ourselves up for more success. So let me give you some tips on how to do this differently, because you're going to have difficult conversations inside your relationship, and avoiding them does not help the relationship. So instead, let's set you up for success. The first thing, instead of going to your partner and saying, we need to talk, his defenses will automatically go up when you do that. So at that point, you have now just set yourself up for failure. You might as well not even bother. He's defensive and he will not be able to hear you. And so anything that you say is not going to get through. We're sort of dead in the water at that point. So instead, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to him and say, there's something that I've been thinking about that I really want to talk to you about. It's pretty important. When would be a good time for us to talk? Now he knows he's not being ambushed. He knows there's something important that you want to talk about, and he gets to set the time of when that's going to happen, and then he's prepared for that conversation. Such a better strategy. The second thing that we do that kind of shoots us in the foot is we start telling them what we want them to hear. During this conversation, we just automatically go into talking mode, and we don't start by listening. And here's what I want to tell you. If you don't start by listening to your partner, you do not have enough information to even make your case anyway. So instead of going in with, here's the things that I want you to know, I want you to go in, tee up the topic, whatever it is. Let's say it's a parenting issue. Tee up the topic and ask him his opinion or perspective on it first. You will learn something in that conversation. You will learn what's important to him and what is not important to him. And then guess what? When it's your turn to share your perspective on that topic, you now have more information. You're much more likely to be able to use that information to be able to come to some kind of a conclusion that might work for both of you. Because you may not be as far apart as you might assume that you are. And the last thing that I want you to know is that no one changes just because you want them to. So many times we come into these conversations with the we need to talk. We just start talking and telling them what we want them to hear and how they're doing something wrong and how we need them to change and be different. No wonder we're not getting anywhere. So that third piece is they're not going to just magically change because you want them to. It doesn't mean people are not capable of changing their behaviors. Of course they are. But they have to want to do it. No one is going to change just because you want them to change. Change is difficult. Change feels uncomfortable. But they will change if there's something in it for them. Like, I'll bet if your husband knew that if he tweaked one little thing, it made you feel really cared for and supported, he'd be much more likely to change than if we come at him through criticism where he feels like he's got to defend himself and he never does anything right and you're never going to be happy no matter what. Maybe that sounds familiar. I hear that a lot. So here's the thing. We want to come into the conversations. 3 things. The first is don't use we need to talk. Tell him you have something important to talk to him about and ask when's a good time. The second is instead of just going in and telling them what you want them to hear, ask their perspective first. And then when they're done, say, okay, great, I'd like to share my perspective with you on this topic to see if we can come to some resolution. And the third thing is if you want their behavior to change, you got to give them a reason to change. And you wanting them to is not a good enough reason. But you feeling loved, cared for, supported, any of that, men want to be the provider and protector for you. If you can help them do that, now they have a reason to change. Here's the thing. As human beings, when we are not feeling threatened, there's nothing to defend against. We're not defensive. And when no one is defensive, well, now we're able to understand one another. And isn't that the whole point? One last thing. I hear some of you, you might be out there saying, well, Sharon, I tried that. It didn't work. Here's the thing. If you have done this a certain way, like we need to talk, and then you went into criticizing and how he needs to be different, and you've done that 100 times, you're not going to be able to try this approach once and see the result of it because we've literally trained him to get defensive. So we're going to have to do it, call it 25, 30 times before he sees some consistency that, oh, I don't have to defend. She's not here to attack me. So know that this is going to take more than one time if you have a repetitive pattern of behavior so that your partner can see some consistency and realize that it's changing. All right? If that was helpful for you, I hope that you will subscribe to the channel. If you want to know whenever there's a new video posted, just click the red bell in the upper right corner. And if you are at that place of where you're trying to figure out, can I fix the struggles inside my marriage, or is the only answer to leave? Then I hope you'll consider scheduling a truth and clarity session with either myself or a member of my team so that we can explore whether or not there's a fit for you and I to work together. The link to that application is in the notes below this video. Take good care.